All right. Welcome to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and I have today with me the great opportunity to interview Ana Vargas. Ana, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. You know, one of the favorite things I get to do is interview loan officers who are newer to the industry, because I think that a lot of people that would be watching our episodes and people we might share this with are people that are like you know, just a few years in the mortgage industry, and we're all dealing with the challenges that this market presents, but also the opportunities. I've been doing this for 26 years, and I assure you this market is providing challenges to even us seasoned veterans. But like we do so many times, I want to start off by just getting a little bit of background on you for the audience so they kind of know who you are and how you found yourself in this crazy mortgage industry. So why don't you start by letting us know kind of, you know, how you got into the mortgage business and how long you've been doing it for.
So a couple of years ago, when I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in business, I was looking for an opportunity to use my degree, and the opportunity to get into a nonprofit came across. It is a nonprofit here in Seattle that focuses on down payment assistance and lending. So that's what I went right into. They really wanted a Spanish-speaking LO, got licensed while I finished my degree, and I loved every aspect of it.
Yeah. So helping with down payment assistance, so I'm assuming your business has kind of always gravitated then towards first-time home buyers, helping people kind of acquire that first home buying opportunity.
Correct. It's really getting them ready and creating a plan to get them there. Yeah.
So how has that transitioned into your business today? So now you work here with us at New American Funding. It's 100% kind of self-sourced business, which I'm assuming is kind of new for you, right?
Correct. Yep. At my previous job, we would work with other organizations, other nonprofits. So this is definitely a new arena for me.
Yeah. What do you find being the biggest challenge in this environment? Is it the, you know, finding opportunities to get business referred to you? Is that where you've spent the most of your time?
Yes, that is definitely. So I've spent time on both getting the word out there of what I do and how I help folks, but then also talking to realtors. And one of the problems that I'm coming across is they tell me, well, I've had the same lender for 20 years, you know, and so I think that's been kind of a struggle for me, at least.
Yeah, well, you know, I talk to a lot of loan officers that are newer in the business, both on this podcast and then just people that we coach, right? And I gotta be honest with you. I think that there's a little bit of truth to that. When a realtor says, you know, look, I've worked with the same lender for 20 years, part of that is an excuse, right? It's like, hey, like, I don't really want to, you know, have to say yes to you today. So I'm just going to put up this pretty standard objection, which is I have a lender that I've been working with. And I think for all newer loan officers, this is where you have an opportunity to layer in a script, right? So one thing I used to love to say, because you got to remember, I don't know how much you watch this podcast, but I started originating when I was 19 years old. So I was brand new, you know, really to the workforce, right? I used to joke with people. They're like, Tony, you're always wearing a suit. Like, why do you wear a suit? I'm like, well, when I first started, if I wasn't wearing a suit, then people would assume I was like skipping high school because I look like a high schooler if you look back at my first business card. But, you know, so these challenges are universal, you know, for so many of us that have gotten into the industry at a young age, or even some who just look young, right? People just assume you don't have the experience. So One of the favorite things that I used to love to ask real estate agents is, look, it's no surprise to me as the professional that you are that you have a long-standing relationship with a lender. I mean, most good realtors do. But what I'd like to ask you is, at some point, you made the decision to give that person a try. And I have to assume you did that because partnering with them would bring some sort of value to your business. So let me ask you this. Is it possible that there's some things that I do, my company does, or that I can do for your clients that might also bring some value to your business that you haven't yet considered? Like, is that a possibility? Because I think it's hard for someone to say, no, that's not possible. Of course it's possible, right? So I think, Ana, what you could do then is with a script like that, or any of you that are newer to this industry is a script like that just opens the door and says, look, I recognize you have the seasoned veteran that you work with, but is there a chance that I too could bring something different? And you certainly can, right? I mean, we have products and programs, you're bilingual, right? You spend a lot of, you have the ability to communicate with people in their native language if that's what they choose to do. But you also have the patience and perseverance to work with first-time home buyers. It's a passion of yours. You shared that with me earlier. And so I think by, planting a seed with these realtors, look, you have your person who does all your deals, but maybe as a new loan officer, consider me for your younger borrowers, for your first-time home buyers, for people that maybe need a little bit more care and help and support, because that's like your foot in the door. And then the opportunity to do a great job with those clients can then leverage itself into being someone's primary lender, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my take. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your working with clients. So you said you love working with first-time home buyers. Maybe you can share with us, like, if someone's looking to purchase a home and they're coming to you and they're just not quite ready yet, what does that conversation look like? What do you do to help them be prepared and then stay in touch with them as they work through getting ready to be a first-time home buyer?
Yeah, so of course we dissect their finances, where they are credit-wise, savings-wise, and timeline-wise as well. We say, these are the debts that you need to work on. This is what you need to budget in order to save for this down payment. Or if they want a bigger house, okay, great. You want to qualify for more? Let's get you there by taking the creating a whole plan for them.
Right.
I do keep in touch. At least I put it in my CRM for about 3 months out.
Okay.
If it's a bit of work, if not, a month out is good. But I do keep in touch for sure. Yeah,
I think that that is the number one place that most salespeople drop the ball, is the follow-up. I think we all love to have that initial conversation, but it's the ongoing work and communication where people tend to drop the ball a little bit. So I'm glad to hear that you have that on point. And, I think that if we look at any younger salesperson's business, there's probably missed opportunities simply by not getting back in touch with someone who wasn't quite ready when we met them.
And I've actually had folks come to me saying, the person I was working with just stopped answering and stopped connecting with me, but I think I'm ready now. And I'm like, great, I'll, of course, take you.
Yeah.
Help you.
Well, I think one of the things that, it's so difficult when we work on commission, because we want to think about our job as a normal job where we work with someone today and we get paid tomorrow. And it just doesn't work that way. You really need to build an ongoing pipeline of people who need your services, some now, some later. And it's really difficult, I think, to be unattached to the outcome, right? So like, you can give the advice, you can give someone a roadmap, and you have to be a bit indifferent as to whether or not that loan ever becomes a closed transaction. Now, hopefully it will, but I think we can't focus on the outcome. We have to focus more on the advice part of the business, right? And just helping as many people as we can, because the more people you help, ultimately, the money will be there, right? Yeah, it is a mind shift change, especially for those of us who had a job. Like before I got into the mortgage business, I like punched a clock, like I knew, like I showed up at this time, I worked for X amount of hours, I punched out, I knew how much I was getting paid. Yeah. And we're in an industry where it just doesn't work that way, and you just have to help and pour into people over and over again, and know that if you're focused on helping enough people get what they want, that you'll come out ahead. Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about you personally. So outside the mortgage business, anything that, keeps you inspired to be, to make this career a success? What is your why, if you will, on why you want this industry to do well for you?
Okay. So I do have several whys. Of course, I have my family. So I have 2 kids, my husband. They are my primary why. I have my kids watching me and seeing everything that I do, everything that I say, and I think it's inspiring them to also go for bigger things.
Yeah.
I come from a background where I was the first one to graduate from college, so to them now, that's not going to be a choice. It's where am I going to college, So that's one thing. The next thing is also I am very motivated by helping our communities. So my why is I want to see our communities build generational wealth and really getting that opportunity to change the generations that come after them by homeownership to begin with. So that's my second why.
Well, I think those are both powerful whys. And hey, shout out to your kids. I think that all of us wake up with the goal of, inspiring our families. But also, it almost hurts a little bit when I hear people today, this is happening, where people are saying, hey, maybe now is not the right time to buy a home, or, things like that. And I actually saw a study, it blew me away. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was a shockingly high number of people that were polled thought that now wasn't the right time to buy a home. And to me, I think about buying a home like I think about, that old saying about when's the best time to plant a tree, right? It's like, well, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But if you missed that opportunity, the second best time is like today. Like, let's get going. And I just think about my life, purchasing my first home at 21 years old. Oh my gosh. Like, I can imagine, the opportunities that I wouldn't have afforded myself had I not purchased that home. And, look, it is way more expensive today. I get that. But also, sometimes people have to, shift their focus. Like, I would love to live, maybe in Bellevue or Kirkland, but maybe that's not reasonable. So I need to go out a little bit. I grew up in Arlington, Washington, which is a very rural area. And I have to imagine my parents didn't, I'm sure they loved the fact that we were kind of out in nature and we were, away from the crowds and all that stuff. But I'm pretty sure the price of the home had something to do with it, right? I grew up in a very blue-collar family, and we had to move far away. And that's something that I think that people, they don't want to compromise, right? They go, gosh, I want to own a home, but is it really worth, having to travel an extra 20 minutes outside of where I wanted to commute in order to be able to afford the right home? And I would argue, I'd love your thoughts on this, but my argument would be absolutely, because, purchasing a home, especially with the products and programs that I know you're passionate about, you help people with down payment assistance, low down payment, first-time home buyer type programs, the leverage that's created. I don't think the average consumer understands that when you're putting 0 to 3%, even 5% down on a home, when that home goes up in value, you're making the equity based on the value of the home, not the amount of money that you contributed, right? Like, if I want to invest in the stock market, I have to put like $100,000 in the stock market, and then it goes up by 10%, right? And then I'm making my 10% of the 100,000. With a home, as soon as you control the asset by having your name on title, when that $200,000, $300,000 house goes up 10% in value, you make it on the whole amount, not your initial investment. And the leverage created by that is powerful. So I would argue, regardless of how far you might need to drive to find the home that meets your family's budget, it's worth it. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, that's actually the number one thing that I really preach to my clients is I get a lot of, well, Anna, I just don't want to go down Auburn, or I don't want to go on the outside. I'm like, well, you kind of have to, unfortunately. And that could be just your first home, Right. In a few years, you can get your second home. Why? Because you've built equity, because you've made that initial investment. That's definitely something that we talk about, as well as you're wasting all that time, right? Or not necessarily wasting it, but you could have spent those 2 years that we've been waiting for the right house and you building equity in that home.
Well, it is wasting time. Turns out, I mean, time, it's the one thing we can't replace. And as time goes on, and look, I think that we're in a market where, there isn't going to be a bad time to buy a home, in my opinion. Like, we've seen, I've talked about on this podcast, we saw values dip a little bit. Everyone knows that the market peaked in June of 2022. Okay, here we are in June of 2023. And let's be honest, I mean, is the housing market crashed?
No.
Not even close. It's like multiple offers.
Yes.
There's no inventory.
I think one day on the market I've seen.
So this idea, and I would argue that in the last 10 years, the scariest time to buy a home was over the last 12 months. And anyone who didn't do it probably already missed out. And now it's even more difficult. And then you couple that with interest rates looking like they're going to improve as inflation comes down. Look, people, if you're watching this, if you're a real estate or mortgage professional, you have to have, the conviction to help your clients understand that now is the best time to buy a home. And you're right. It does create generational wealth in a way that nothing else can, And, when I bought my first home, it really wasn't, what saved me and allowed me to buy my second home? Yeah, the home went up in value, but there was a point between the time that I bought the home and a few years later, I was able to do a debt consolidation. I had credit cards. I was young. I could qualify for the home, but I was never going to really get ahead because I had I used to use credit cards as so many people do just to meet my daily expenses. And I would probably overindulge on things I probably should have waited to buy, but that's normal. I was in my 20s, but it was when I had the ability to buy that home and then do a cash out debt consolidation loan and wipe out all my credit cards. I've never had credit card debt since. It just changes your behavior.
Yes.
Where when you spend all your money every paycheck paying your debt, you have no money left over. You have to then rely on that debt to pay your bills. It's like a vicious cycle. Yep. And for me, at least, and I think for many out there, home ownership helped them get out of that cycle of using debt in that way. And then I continued to build equity, and when the time was right and my family was growing, I bought my next home, and I could qualify for more because I wasn't laden with, consumer debt. So that's something that people forget about, and it's difficult in today's market. I mean, we have more pent-up home equity than I think we've ever had in history, but it's difficult to tap into because interest rates are high right now. But there will be opportunities for people to leverage that equity, whether it be to buy their next home, create generational wealth, or do debt consolidation. And I think people underestimate the opportunities that are actually available in today's market. Even though rates are higher, what's higher than today's mortgage rates? Consumer debt rates, right? Interest rates on cars, credit cards, other consumer loans, they're astronomical. They're tied to the prime rate plus a margin, and prime rate goes up every time the Fed does a rate hike, right? Those are all mostly variable interest rates, and people are paying probably a lot more than they know. And although it's hard to sacrifice the low interest rate you have on your mortgage, in some circumstances, and this is where a great advisor like yourself can help give people the numbers, you have to look at your household blended rate. What are you paying between your mortgage and all of your other debt? And not just the interest rate. People, they get focused on the rate, but it might also be a cash flow issue, right? Because the monthly payments on some of these other consumer debts can be so high in relationship to the balance, when you roll them into a mortgage, it could free up hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month for some people. And even though the interest rate's higher, does it really matter if you have a lower interest rate if you can't make ends meet? If you can't buy groceries, if you can't, pay just the utility bills because your debt is so much? Sometimes a debt consolidation loan isn't about the rate. It's about creating the cash flow in your budget, right? So I think every consumer should consider that as they're looking at options out there. But you're right. Yeah. Home equity is where it's at. All right. So last couple questions I'd like to ask you. So if you had like your ideal client, and you've kind of described this, but I like to ask this of loan officers. So if you could say to a real estate agent, this is the perfect person that you should refer to me, what does that person look like?
Someone who is committed to actually buying the home, becoming a homeowner, sorry. Someone who's willing to do the work, someone who's willing to listen, and just being a good listener, honestly.
So you don't mind how challenging their situation is, as long as at the end they're committed to doing what it takes to actually buy a home.
Correct.
That is a really good point. There's nothing worse than spending the time with someone who's like, I'm not even sure if I want to buy anyway. Yeah, but someone so what I hear you saying is I want people that are passionate about home ownership, come to me in any broken state that you might be in. That's fine. As long as you're committed to it, I can help. This is great. You can help give them the path to get there.
Yes, that's correct.
I like that.
I've actually had, I've worked with a client before where we got so far, 6 months in, credit was great, savings was where we were supposed to be, ready to pull the trigger, and they acquired more debt. And I said, no. And so it's okay. I believe it took us a couple more months, but we got there. But yeah.
I know. We can tell someone so many times that you shouldn't do that.
That's why I want them to listen.
Yes. You have to also listen. Yes. The desire is only part of it. You have to actually follow direction. Well, that's good. Well, one other question I love asking people. I know you're only a couple years into the mortgage banking industry, but still, that's a couple more years than some folks. What have you learned up to this point that you wish you knew the day you started?
I think you've already kind of touched on it, where do not invest yourself basically in the outcome of each and every client, because it will, you're going to keep doing it, and it'll eventually, give you fruit. I think that's the one thing that I would definitely tell myself. It's like, yes, of course, do your work with each client, but don't get too emotionally attached to each one.
Yeah. I think it's a very difficult thing, I think, for us, because it's not natural, right? You're used to this idea that I put in the work and then the loan closes and I get a commission. And it'd be nice if it worked that way. But I think what it does is, if you get tied to the outcome, to your point, you tend to not help people as much. And because you're like, and this is, a lot of loan officers do this. And this is where you can have the edge. Like when you're talking to a real estate agent who's got that 20-year, that lender they've been working with for 20 years, you can just ask them, do they have the same hunger that I have to help a family that might have some credit challenges to get into the home? Because the reality is a lot of people don't. And over time, they have less and less of that desire, right? They're like, hey, I want a qualified client that's well qualified, an easy loan, and I want to get paid. That's one of the things about being newer in this business, is that, and you have to do some of those more difficult loans. But if you do it with the mindset of, abundance, and that you're happy to do it, here's the thing that you're going to find is, not only are the people that you're working with going to be super grateful and ultimately, hopefully, buy a loan, you're never going to know the referrals that you're going to get from somebody because you took the time. Even if I have had people that I never did do. Matter of fact, they never were ready to buy a home for whatever reason. They just never made enough money. They didn't want to put the effort into fixing their credit or saving for a down payment or whatever the reason might be. But because I took the time and treated them like a human, they said, hey, look, homeownership maybe isn't for me at this time in my life, but I got a friend and they really need to talk to you. And so you can actually get great referrals from clients who are never going to get a loan from you.
I've had something very similar happen. So yes, fully agree.
You never know where that next transaction is going to come from, and treating people the right way is, I think, the key to it. Right on.
Agree.
Well, Anna, I appreciate you making the drive up here today to be on here. Look, if you're watching this episode, I hope that you took a nugget or two away from this conversation. I think so many people are at that place where Anna's at, where, one of the biggest challenges is building relationships with some real estate professionals who have long-term relationships. I think that's the biggest challenge. And I've talked to other people about that. We gave a little bit of scripts around that, but I think that perseverance is huge. And being yourself and letting people know that you're here, you're hungry, right? You're willing to put in the time and the effort. And that's endearing to people. They don't hear that all the time, right? I think a lot of people who are someone's preferred lender, they take for granted that they're in that position. And if you can find a few niche products that you can focus in on, I think that, focusing on first-time home buyers, being bilingual, really identifying these value propositions. And then it's just a matter of building relationships, right? Connecting, going to open houses. Do not give up on your prospecting, because it probably takes a little bit more than what anyone expects, especially in a market like this. You just got to keep going. And I know that you have the tenacity to do that, Anna. So I know that you're going to be super successful. For those of you watching this episode, let us know your thoughts. Thank you, as always, for your time and attention. And obviously, like and subscribe to the podcast, because that certainly helps us out. But more than that, share this conversation with people that you might know in the mortgage and real estate industry. I would be eternally grateful for that recommendation. And until next time, thank you so much and take care.